Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a tier ranking for scenes from The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This will be completely spoilery for the first book in the series, but I'm not going to touch on any spoilers for anything else in the series, so if you've only read the first book, you're safe. For this, I picked 20 different scenes from The Final Empire, 20 scenes that I think are really notable, that really stand out, that really make this book so exceptional and a reason so many of us love this series. But the hard thing was that I tried to only pick the best scenes, so then I'm trying to put all the best scenes against each other. So the categories, the bottom tier is still going to be made up of scenes that I think are fantastic. It actually made this really difficult, and I'm very curious how you would all rank the scenes that we're going to be going through. So there's 20 different scenes and there's 5 different tiers. I'm going to go through the 20 different scenes that will be tier ranking. I have them all written down on a notebook, so I'm just going to go through them really quick. We have Kelsier's death, Vin asking Kelsier not to abandon her, Sazed saving Vin from Kredik Shaw, the first of the mists, aka that first time that Vin is up high, she's learning how to use allomancy, and Kelsier just tells her to jump. Death of the Lord Ruler, Yomen losing the army. That's Cold Vin. If you don't remember that scene, it's when everybody from Vin's crew at the beginning of the book, turns out all of them were brutally murdered, and she sees that everything happened the way it did, and she doesn't seem to have a whole lot of emotions, and Kelsier tells her that's Cold Vin. The Pewter drag, the first time after Yomen loses the army, and they hear about it, and then Vin and Kelsier rush to try to get there. Marsh's death. Marsh is still alive. The reading spot, which is sort of a combination of any time Vin and Elend meet. Vin's outburst. So if you don't remember that scene, there's a moment where Vin yells at everybody in the crew and she basically tells them all they don't know what it's like to be a Ska. We have Kelsier versus the nobles, which would be that first time that you really see allomancy used. Kelsier versus the Inquisitor, aka when Kelsier saves Elend despite him being a noble. Vin killing Shan Allerial. Elend trying to save Vin at the end. Sazed trying to save Vin at the end. Elend versus Straff, so there's that moment when Straff is leaving the city and Elend says, I'm staying. It's kind of like a head-to-head between Elend and his father. It's a contest of wills. The cost, which would be when Kelsier and the crew witness all of the Ska that are being killed as a result of their actions. And then last, Kelsier's plan. So this would be when he has died and then you're realizing everything that he had put in place. You're realizing he kind of was planning on dying and everything that comes with that. So those are the 20 scenes that you have to try to tier rank if you want to follow along, or if you just want to be like, what? How could she place that one there? You can just, enjoy that element of the video. The different tiers, though, the top tier is the Mistborn tier. So this is the best. These would be the scenes that set this book apart, that make it so exceptional. These are the best of the best. Then the next tier would be ATM. These are kind of defining moments, moments that are really significant, but perhaps maybe aren't my personal all-time favorites. Then we have the Ferochemy tier, which were scenes that are great, but they're maybe not exceptional, and they're also not at the bottom of this. And we have Mistings, good, but not as good as some of the other things that are on the list. And then a regular old person would be our bottom one. This is just, it happened. I'm actually gonna start with all of the scenes that I would place in the Ferochemy tier, so the middle tier. The first one that I'm gonna put in here is Vin kills Shan Allerial. This is a very satisfying moment. Shan Allerial was very obnoxious and annoying, and it was a cool fight scene. It's one of my favorites because you really get to see Vin have to fight other Mistborn and a person she wasn't expecting to be a Mistborn, and then there's other people involved as well. And even just the way she shows up with the crew all shocked afterwards, and she's like, I killed Shan Allerial. Also, I fought some Mistborn. And her just being so calm, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, what? And they're all flipping out because there's obviously so much more that is going to come about as a result of killing somebody from one of the noble houses. And they're like, Vin, what? So it's a good scene, but Shan is not the most compelling of villainous type of characters. She's kind of a subplot villain. There's not a ton of depth to her. She's a thorn in your side, but it's not the most satisfying of moments. After that, maybe this is going to be controversial, but I'm going to say the reading spot. And again, this is a combination of various different scenes between Elend and Vin. Elend and Vin are cute, but the first time, because I've read it 3 times at this point, the first time I read this, I was like, is this guy a good guy? Or, I don't know, I can't tell. Is he playing her? Is she just being foolish? Am I foolish? If I like this, I can't tell. And then the second time, you know what's up. And I was kind of thinking, you know, Vin and Elend, they're cute. They're fine, but there's a lot of other things that are maybe more important that are going on. So this is a nice break from those things, those heavy things. But, and then the third time through, I don't know, they were still just sort of cute. So they're going to stay just right in the middle. I enjoy them, but they're not my favorite. They're not, when I think about the Final Empire, I'm not like, oh my gosh, the reading spot, that's not the thing that gets me. I'm also putting That's Cold Vin in this category. I could see this one being lower just because as far as some of the heavier moments, the more violent moments in the book, the moments that make you realize just how high the stakes are, it's not really the highest. But I think that this particular moment it's beyond just look at the stakes. It's also showing Vin how traumatized she is, that she's not particularly fazed, how isolated she's always been, that she didn't really care that much about those people, how exposed to violence she's already been. I think that because of that, I couldn't really place this any lower than at least this tier. Next, we have the Marsh is still alive. I put that in this category because I think it is very exciting when you realize that the pieces were there. And also it's kind of like the Here Comes the Cavalry moment where you think everything is going to the ground, everything's falling apart, and then Marsh shows up and you're like, what? And so the timing of it is pretty great. This, I think, will definitely be one that a lot of people disagree with. I have a feeling this next one is going to be one that most people put, maybe even at the very top, and if not the top, at least the second tier. And I'm putting it in the middle one, and that would be Kelsier versus the Inquisitor / Kelsier saves Elend. This scene just never got me. The action scene is awesome. I definitely like this fight a lot, but I also think that the whole Kelsier saving Elend, I get that it's a big moment for him because he's so angry and filled with rage at nobles, and he just doesn't even really consider them people. And you see that time and time again. But I guess there's something about him being like, oh, well, Vin loves you, so get on out of here, kid. And him saving him. I know it's not that cheesy or anything, but it's not that it felt forced. It felt very natural, and it made sense that he would do that. But I remember the first time I read it where I was like, do you really need to save that guy? Because I was really sad. I didn't want Kelsier to put himself in danger. And I don't feel that way now. But in the moment, you know, I didn't have an attachment to Elend. I had an attachment to Kelsier. And I don't know if maybe that initial first reaction just kind of stuck with me or what. But this scene, you know what I know? I know what it is. It's that the very next thing that happens, that steals your attention. And so it almost kind of brings this scene down a little bit because we know what happens right after that. So moving on now, I'm going to alternate between the second tier and the fourth tier. So we're kind of slowly moving into the extremes. I have more things in the ATM tier than I do in the misting tier. So I'm going to name a couple that are in the ATM tier, the second tier. First, we have Sazed rescues Vin from Kredik Shaw. Even though you're pretty sure Vin is going to make it, I gotta say, that scene, all 3 times that I've read it, I know obviously what's gonna happen the second and third time through, but every time it gets me. Every time I'm like, oh man, she's really in danger right now. Kelsier is gone, and the Inquisitor is coming after her. What's she gonna do? And then you don't know about Sazed's powers really at this point. So when he shows up, and he's so gentle and kind, and then he risks himself to save her, it's such a great Sazed moment because Sazed is a character that he is strangely almost the definition of a gentle giant because he can be such a force, even though he isn't most of the time, but he's so gentle and he's so sweet, and this gives you a glimpse of what he's capable of. And it also, there's the intrigue factor that builds. You're relieved for Vin, but then you're also like, how did he do it? There's something going on with that Sazed guy. And so I just think that that scene is great. I also have to put Firsts of the Mists in this category because there's something about that first scene. It's described so well. I can so easily picture it in my mind. It's so vivid. And if there's ever an adaptation, you know that scene is going to be there. It's such a monumental first step, a leap of faith, both literally and metaphorically for Vin. And that moment, it just kind of sticks with you. It really does feel like the turning point in the story of when Vin, it's not just a turning point in the story, it's also just a turning point for her. I'm just repeating myself. I'm just rewording the same things. It's a great scene. I love that scene. So yes, it's in the ATM category. Going back down to the misting category, I'm gonna put Elend versus Straff. So that moment again where Elend tells his father, "No, I'm staying." It's a great moment because it does show Elend choosing to stay with his city. It shows Elend really standing by his ideals, and it shows him standing up to Straff Venture. I think what makes this scene maybe not as significant to me or as memorable or as hard-hitting is the fact that Elend is really not the most major of characters in this first book. And on top of that, Straff, you really don't know all that much about him. There's just not really, I think, enough with those two to build the satisfaction that you might get if it were different characters. Going back up to the ATM category, I think this might maybe surprise some people, but I gotta say, the death of the Lord Ruler, it's not at the very top. It's in this second category. So this is obviously a fantastic moment. All of the puzzle pieces come together. I think I'm to a point now, though, where it was so obvious to me on my third read-through. I was like, how do they not get it yet? Which is silly because I can see all the foreshadowing at this point. So that's really not fair, and I know it's not fair. But even the first time through, I kind of figured, this is where the book is going, right? Like, they gotta kill the Lord Ruler. So it's more of just, it's satisfying, but it doesn't really shock me. It doesn't surprise me. I will say, though, man, this is the problem with doing these tier rankings, and as I start talking through it, I'm like, maybe it is at the top. So Vin saying, "I bring a message from a friend. He is the thing you cannot kill. He is hope." I already have some other scenes. I might have to swap some things around. That quote is just very good. After that, we have Vin's Outburst. I always say that I'm a character-driven reader. I love big moments for characters, and I feel like this is a perfect example of that. I don't think this is probably a big deal to most people, but the scene where Vin yells at the crew, the scene where she tells him, "You have no idea, you basically are all nobles," and she tells them about how they don't know anything about what it's like to live on the streets, to constantly live in fear. I think that scene is really powerful because there's so much about trust between all these characters, and there's so much about working as a team. But Vin really has an experience like none of the rest of them, and they're so cold-hearted when it comes to how they see nobility without recognizing just how fortunate they are. And so I think it's not just a powerful scene for Vin, but it's also a powerful scene for them to have maybe a little bit of a turning point. I think Kelsier as well. I think this is one of those moments that leads him to start to change how he thinks. And it's just a pivotal moment for adding depth to the relationships between Vin and the rest of the crew. Going back down to the misting category, we have the Pewter drag scene. So this scene is awesome. This is one of my favorite, being able to show what the individual metals are capable of allowing you to do. And so it's awesome, but at some point you're really tired and you're running for a really long time. Like, you get it. I don't think it drags on too long. I don't think it's too short. I think it's the right amount of time. But it's not an awesome fight scene. It's not a great character moment. It's not this really amazing, oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened. It's not anything really in that realm, but it's really cool. It's a cool scene. But I think it's more of that Sanderson made something that could have been super boring, running for a long time, he made it really cool. So in some ways I'm like, oh, does it deserve to be higher? But then I'm like, no, other scenes are a little bit more impactful. I'll finish up this particular tier, and I'm going to say Marsha's death. That is another one where I'm very curious if a lot of you are like, no way, that's one of the best scenes. But I found Marsha's death to sort of be not quite a footnote. It wasn't that we just pass over it, because obviously it's tragic, but it's just one thing after the next. When we finally get to that moment, Kelsier is having to push so hard. There's so many things that are going wrong with their plan, and then his brother dies. And he's devastated, and Vin's like, we gotta get out of here. And I think that Kelsier's perseverance and his willingness to push through the pain, the emotional pain, the physical pain, this is an example of that. But I guess I wish I had seen him struggle a little bit more. I feel like that was a devastating moment, especially when he thinks that his brother probably suffered so much given what he thinks to be his brother's body and the state it's in. So I just feel like there could have been more time for Kelsier to just be angry, to need to process that. I guess what I'm saying is I thought that scene could have been a bigger deal. It was a big deal to me, but it almost didn't feel like it was a big enough deal to everybody else. So that's why it's not higher up. If it had been dealt with differently, it would probably be at the top. We're going to close out the ATM tier with Sazed tries to save Vin. And I mean at the very end, when Vin goes to fight the Lord Ruler and then Sazed is there. I just love him so much. Sazed coming to the rescue, it gets me every time. And I don't know if there's much else to say. I just love him so much. But you know what's very, very silly of me is that when Elend tries to save Vin, I'm putting this in the regular old person category. Some people maybe think it's romantic. Maybe you think, wow, Elend literally has no powers and doesn't know how to fight. And he's going anyway, so that's why I love that scene. What a brave man. But in my head, I'm like, I mean, what did you think was going to happen? Like, what do you think you're going to be able to do? It's one of those things where I couldn't help but think you're just going to make things worse. You're just a body that's in the way that now they have to protect. It's like when you're playing a video game and there's an NPC that tags along during a certain mission. You're like, geez, that was Elend for me in that moment. Another potential controversial placement. We're going to go way up to the top in the Mistborn category. And Yomen losing the army. I'm putting that in this spot. I'm second guessing myself because I'm like, that quote with Vin when she kills the Lord Ruler, it's so good. But Yomen losing the army, every single read through, there's the anger at him where you're like, dude, are you freaking kidding me, you moron? Like, you get so angry about his decision. And then you're like, what are they going to do? How is the crew going to bounce back from this? They literally lost their whole army. It feels like everything should be over. You're like, there's a lot of book left. What are they going to do? Are they going to even kill the Lord Ruler in this book? Like, there's just so many questions. And it's such a shocking moment. And it just is pulling the rug out from under you. I loved that scene so much. And the devastation where Kelsier's like, maybe this is it. Where he wants to go to fight and Vin holds him back and says, you are only human, you cannot go. I just think that that's a phenomenal scene. I'm also putting Kelsier's death in this spot. I mean, how could you not, right? Kelsier dying. I know that certain stories, main characters die, but I think the Final Empire, Kelsier is, okay, he's technically not the first perspective because the prologue is some gross noble out in the country, right? It's not actually Kelsier, but it's the first moments are showing you Kelsier and making him this mysterious figure that you want to know more about. So he is kind of the main character, especially for so long at the beginning when Vin isn't quite the main character. And to kill off what is basically your main character is such a big deal, but also he's likable, he's the leader, he's the one that encourages everybody to keep going, he's powerful. It's phenomenal. I'm going to stick with this category still and follow that up with the Kelsier's plan. So there's a lot about Kelsier's plan that I think makes it worthy of being considered one of the best things. One, all of the foreshadowing that Kelsier was planning to die, to see all of that and then have it come true and have it work, and to see the Ska finally rise up, that moment where the crew and Vin and everybody's, they're seeing what Kelsier's plan has done. I think it's really powerful. But the thing that really gets me, when Vin thinks, so you did abandon me, and there's a part of her that thinks, I told you, I asked you not to, and she's just devastated at losing him. She's lost so much already. He's the person she's closest to out of anyone and has been for basically all of her life. There's the fact that Kelsier says, we always wanted a daughter, and you're like, oh my gosh, what are you doing to me? So there's just so much about afterwards, after his death, that hits so hard. It's in the same line. I'm just going to stay in this category here for a second. Vin saying, please don't abandon me, and Kelsier saying basically nothing in that moment. He can't answer her. I think this is a reread favorite because you know, one, that he's gonna die, and then you're like, oh, when you read it, and because, again, the foreshadowing, you actually see it in that moment because you know he's planning on it and he doesn't want to leave her behind. And so when she's like, please don't abandon me, and you know what it means to her, I know, again, it falls into the same things I was saying about the previous scene, but that part, it gets me. So there were only two things in the bottom tier, in the regular old person tier. So the other scene is Kelsier versus the nobles. I think that this is a cool way to introduce the magic system, to show you something so bizarre and over the top and kind of make you feel taken aback, thinking, am I ever going to be able to understand what just happened? And then you will be able to very clearly understand it. But there's no emotional stakes in that moment. You don't really know Kelsier. You have no idea what's going on. And then the last thing that I put in the top tier, and I'm kind of thinking I need to swap it out with the Lord Ruler's death, would be the cost. When, it's great too though. When you see the cost of a revolution, when you see the cost of their heist, when you see them actually realizing, oh, our actions, they do have an impact, and innocent people have to die. Innocent people are dying, and this is what's at stake. Look at the violence. We have to fight against this. It's a great establishing of stakes. It's devastating, even though you don't know any of those people that are being killed in that moment. It still hurts. Oh, you know what? I gotta swap it. I have to swap it with, just for that quote of Vin's with the Lord Ruler. So I'm swapping this one. I'm putting it in the second tier. And I'm putting the death of the Lord Ruler in this first one. So I feel pretty confident now with my placements. I feel confident in this very moment. I bet when I go to edit this video, I'm gonna be like, no way, was that scene better? But it is what it is. It's fine. It's not like I'm making a life-altering decision. That's the final verdict. That is where I would place these scenes. I would love to know where you would place these scenes. What are some of your all-time favorites? What are some scenes that I left out? Because there were so many that I didn't have in here, and there's so many great scenes in the Final Empire. I'll add, too, that this list would look different, just literally in what scenes I would have as top scenes if I were factoring in spoilers for the other books, because there's some things that stand out about this once you go further in, and I can't include those if I'm keeping it to just this first book. But there's some other things that are pretty cool in hindsight. But anyway, that's it for this tier ranking of some Mistborn scenes. I hope you all enjoyed this. If you'd like to see more Sanderson related videos, I'll have my playlist linked. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.